is Sophia Figueroa. My pronouns are she, her.
My name's Carlos. I use they, them pronouns.
My name is Archer, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, my name is Sib. I go by he, they pronouns.
I'm Taylor. My pronouns are they, them.
My name is Sarah, and I go by she and her.
My name is Jameson. My pronouns are he, him, they.
My name is V. Franco, and pronouns are she, her, hers.
It really came to me suddenly during the pandemic. So around 2020, I think, is when it first crossed my mind. And I feel like a huge aspect of that was just spending a lot of time by myself and just coming to terms with my body dysmorphia and stuff that didn't sit right with me about gender norms and stuff like that. And I had never really felt like a mask presenting person throughout my life. And I would say that it was around 2020 that I decided to come out as non-binary. Before that, I was just, pushing down all those thoughts. I feel like I had known since I was younger, but it really took until the pandemic for me to be comfortable saying that I wasn't comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realized in my sophomore year of high school, more when I found out, or when I kind of got the knowledge of what being trans really was, or being non-binary. Just because originally I eased my way in, and even when I came out, I eased people in with the whole, I might be a little more gender non-conforming, a little in between, instead of kind of going straight into I'm trans. So I definitely sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting because it kind of determines where you define the beginning. So I really came out freshman year of college, which was about 2018. I want to say, not 2017, but even before that in high school, I knew that I wasn't cis het, but I didn't have the words for that.
Yeah.
When it comes to someone who's assigned male at birth and stuff, you're kind of taught to kind of suppress all that femininity. So for me, it was trying really hard to kind of find that balance between, is this something gender related, or am I just a feminine dude? Do I need to suppress that? Is that real? All these sorts of things kind of going on. So I came out to myself probably somewhere around high school, but officially in college, when I was away from family, away from all the stresses, and actually had some positive supports around me.
Yeah. When I first realized, I was probably 4, but when I actually started transitioning, I was 13.
Okay.
I would say probably 2020. I'm 25 now, and I was in college. And it's when I say this is when I started to, or knew, it was kind of just realizing that that's where I was supposed to be. I had always known that there was something different. And so I actually came out as non-binary and bisexual in 2020, knowing that that was not the fullest of what I wanted. It was just what I thought was possible. So that's kind of where it started. It took me 2 years and moving to a more accepting state before it kind of just clicked.
Yeah.
But as soon as I got to a place where it seemed like it was safe to do it, it was a no-brainer.
So I actually started kind of questioning myself when I was 12, but I didn't actually figure myself out until last summer, because I went through that, that whole thing of you question yourself and then you say no, and then you push yourself back in the closet for a few years. But I figured it out, so that's good.
Yeah.
I started really thinking about my gender and exploring it I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. Before then, I had always kind of known that I wasn't quite what people always said where it was a girl, you know, like I never really fit in a lot of ways, and I never really fit into being like a man or a boy either. So I just didn't have the language or anything, any experience or knowledge that there were any other options. I moved away from my hometown. I went to college and like started taking classes and got educated, and suddenly realized like, oh, I have options, and like there's ways to explain these things that I'm feeling, or like this lack of what I'm feeling, basically. So I would say I started sort of experimenting and thinking about it really critically, actually, like 3 years ago.
I would say maybe like it's been 2 years, 2.5 years, maybe a little more than that. Like there's a little bit of kind of like exploring for like half a year before I fully came out as trans.
My biggest difficulty in the community would revolve around just battling my own brain about what it means to be non-binary, and just conforming to a certain way of queer, which I know is like paradoxical and hypocritical because queer means not fitting into any sort of mold, but it's still something that I find difficult in the queer community because I feel like it's still full of a lot of patriarchal and not necessarily heteronormative, like I don't like I wouldn't want to use the term like homonormative, but there is like a narrative of what it means to be gay and or queer, which I think doesn't make sense because queer just means that you're different. And I feel like many of the queer people that I meet are necessarily not as in touch. Well, also myself, I'm not in touch with the queer experiences that I go through, and so I just find it difficult to like connect with other people in the community.
Yeah.
I think my biggest difficulty has been facing myself. I have struggled to come to terms with having confidence and going out and being like, this is who I am. It's easy to do that in solitude, or for a while at least. I'm comfortable in it, and then when it comes to being like out in the real world and having to be like, this is who I am, it doesn't feel as easy. So I think having that confidence to come to terms with myself out in the real world has definitely been my biggest struggle.
The biggest difficulty, I would say, would probably be with learning how to navigate society itself. I mean, I don't even know if that's like a self thing, but it really is the fact that I see myself as a strong, beautiful, independent woman. I am here doing the things I want to do. I'm creative. I do kind of my stuff. I love to do art. I love to do science. I love to do math. I love to do coding. But that isn't really what people see on a national scale. You see news articles here and there talking about like trans youth, trans people in bathrooms, and kind of like me as a talking point kind of leads to just a ton of unneeded stress. Basically people knowing that there are millions of people out there speculating about me and people like me rather than wanting to talk to me as like an individual. It does things to your like internal view of yourself and how you view the world in general.
Yeah.
Not fitting into any comfortable box very well. I don't like being hyper-masculine, but I'm not exactly comfortable with my femininity either. And I get a lot of shit from the gay community itself.
I mean, if I would say healthcare for the most part. I mean, it was like, I came out, and at that point I didn't know what to do. Like I was unsure of like what direction I was going to take. And I'm in Colorado, and there's like a lot of resources and stuff like that, but coming from Georgia, I had no idea how to find those things, or what I was I guess you could say entitled to, and even you know, even here with the healthcare system that they have, which is a little bit better than a lot of the other states, it was still pretty difficult. And I still ended up going with like a third-party healthcare that was able to get my, medications and stuff so much quicker. So I would honestly say that was the biggest part.
I think just in general, everything that we all kind of have to deal with, like just with the world hating us all the time. I don't know. I just think it's very unnecessary. Like we should just be treated as the human beings that we are.
I guess there's a lot that's difficult about it, but for me, dealing with my family is really difficult. Like they are very conservative, like Republican, and they don't use my pronouns. They have told me that they will never do that for me, and like they say they respect me and I can do whatever I want, but they say and vote very homophobically. Like the things they say and like what they believe, they're also, racist and all this other stuff. And it's like they're still my family and I still love them, even though it drives me absolutely insane that they can't see my perspective or the way I see the world. So it's like kind of navigating that and like figuring out how to set boundaries and like just dealing with that has been so far the most difficult thing.
Definitely the discrimination, definitely the misgendering is a huge one. Like still today, like to this day, like at my job, I get I get misgendered, and like out in public it's all the time, and like I mean it happens to both of us, all the time we get misgendered, but like I get it a lot, and I feel like people do it to me like really like to rub salt into the wound, kind of like, oh you're a dude or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of like that, and obviously trying to like deal with that is definitely a part of it. Yeah.
Just, staying involved in the community is always going to be a huge impact, especially if you're part of the queer community. I feel like educating allies, while it doesn't necessarily fall as the burden of queer people, I feel like we should always still be proactive and sensing what we are able to teach and pushing our boundaries and like what we can say to cis people to like not keep them in check necessarily, but like remind them like, hey, like, like these conceptions you have of what it means to be like biologically male, like they're riddled in colonial terminology that literally genocides people of color, trans people, and other gender non-conforming people. And I feel like it just has to be something that we have to like attack on all fronts in the community, like not just on the social level, but in the family unit. Like otherwise, like we're just gonna get silenced. Like right now, literally parents are still abusive to trans children. Like it's not safe to be trans in the US, like especially if you're young, and it's literally just because of the mass arrogance that we're all taught, and just fear for queer people, for people that are happy doing what they know makes them happy. And I mean, I wish I had an easy answer, but I feel like there's just so many things that need to be done to help out the trans and gender non-conforming community. And I feel like it's important to start with yourself, obviously, but also work beyond that.
I have a question for you, I guess the interviewer. As like a fellow trans person, or as a fellow trans man, like how do you keep up with what's going on in our community? Like I do have that. Where do you kind of seek information, or who do you kind of go to? Or
I don't
who do
know.
you
I
listen
can't
to?
remember the name of the website, but there is a website that keeps up to date with new trans laws that are passing, new trans bills that are going on, and that keeps up to date for everywhere in the United States.
Yeah.
And then I also follow a couple people online on like TikTok who like focus on getting information and finding that stuff out, who like put out stuff like that. Maybe like 2 years ago, it's like, yeah, I've like paid attention, but not so much. And then I got more involved in the community. I realized, holy shit, all this shit's happening, and it's happening like behind our backs, and it's gonna get to a point where we're gonna blink and it's gonna be like, oh shit, where's my rights?
Yeah.
What happened? I didn't know that was coming. Where'd that come from? And it's just like, if you do not pay attention to the bills coming into coming into place, like that's what it's our duty as citizens to vote and make sure that these things don't pass, when it comes to like our choices and like what we can do. They're gonna listen to us, go to city council meetings, like get your voice out there, doing things like that. Like I just recently went to the city council meeting to like make sure that we could raise the flag that's right behind you. Like it seems like small stuff, but like in terms of like the big picture, it's not.
Weird because not that many people talk about it, so it's nice to have like a face-to-face conversation with someone who kind of understands, or who definitely understands, because personally I don't really have that when I'm talking to anyone else out in my close circle. So I know I keep up on YouTube or social media like Instagram, TikTok, but it's definitely not the same. Just if you put it.
I mean, it really is that, like I mentioned before, is just treating us as people. There are a lot of people that want to debate. They want to talk about trans rights in this sort of like philosophical sense of whether or not we deserve rights, what kind of rights, how much, where is that goalpost? When really the bottom line kind of comes down to, do you see us as people? Do you see our gender identity as real? And because of that, like, will you just let us live? If you were just to kind of look at these trans people and be like, I don't know why this person wants to wear the things they do, or act the way that they do, or why they want this name, that doesn't really concern you.
Yeah.
There have been no reports of this being like super duper dangerous across the board, like, you're gonna let one trans person in a bathroom and suddenly society will collapse. That doesn't exist. Yet people have kind of come to this kind of idea that this is gonna happen and this is what's gonna take it too far. This is just like how it was for gay people in the 90s. People thought that, they're gonna get married, it's gonna turn into like a collapse of society, the children are gonna be, in danger and stuff. And although people have been kind of passed bills like that now still, that kind of like ended in the 90s, in the early 2000s. And because, homophobes didn't really have something to latch onto as strongly, they just moved the same exact rhetoric to trans people. And some people realize that. I don't think a lot of people do, though. They don't realize that it's just the same regurgitation, same nonsense. It was debunked in the 70s, it was debunked in the 80s, it was debunked in the 90s. I don't know what else to say. Just treat us as people and don't keep listening to the fucking news saying that the world's gonna end,
Stop putting up so many barriers. People are people. I don't really need to know the specifics of you as a person to like you, and I don't think your gender or your identity should change my opinion of you at all.
It's like, I think what I have noticed is like really important is just like everyone showing that they accept people. Because for my entire upbringing, even though I was raised in the South, my parents were really progressive, and I grew up kind of just accepting everyone, but never really saying that and never telling anybody that. So it's like, how is that, other than, just my immediate surroundings and like who I'm able to make friends with and everything, it wasn't really like, apparent. And I think that message and like just the awareness of like knowing that there are people who accept people as they are, that's really effective, especially for people who are worried or scared that there's not going to be anybody there.
like with from what I've seen like on TikTok and stuff, we're already pretty great community. But I think we could just work on like having each other's backs a little more. There's been some hate within the trans community that I've seen now and then, and I think just kind of getting rid of that toxicity is what we need.
I think education is like a huge thing. Is like, first of all, mind your business. Second of all, like maybe Google it if you have a question. Like it's not actually that difficult to understand, even though people say it is. Like it didn't take me very long to like get it. Yeah, definitely like educating kids, like putting it in. First of all, we need healthy sex ed in the first place. We already don't have that for even like heterosexual sex. It's still very lacking. So fix that. Put in trans and gay, affirming like information. Like it's okay. Hey, it's okay to be gay. Like straight up, it's okay.
Getting down to the nitty-gritty of topics, like really talking about what needs to be talked about, and like obviously there are certain times where you kind of like need to make it digestible and make it like information like for people to be like understandable and for them to take it a little better. You can't just like shock everyone at all times, like it's shit's like exhausting. But that's like it's tiring to like be constantly in fear and constantly in panic, but sometimes there's no avoiding it, you know what I mean? Like it's like you sometimes should feel, it sounds weird, but you sometimes should feel that way, because like personally, like nowadays, like there's all these anti-trans bills that are being looked over, reviewed, even passed at times in certain states. I mean, it's like it's crazy to see that kind of like happen and like develop and really like spread out. So it's like kind of like trying to like stray away from that and educate away from that is definitely another thing that I see that's necessary, because it's a really big problem that comes from a long generational passing. And it's not as easy as saying it's generational passing. There's a lot more to it. Like it just depends where you're coming from or who you talk to, what they follow, if they follow anything, any practice in their life or whatever. Like there's so much that like comes into someone's like view on people and how they interact with people and how they like see themselves. Because I'll be like walking out in public and people will look at me very nasty, and I can tell the difference between nowadays. Like for a while I couldn't, between a look of like confusion and like weird like hate because they're confused and it makes them uncomfortable, and straight up ignorance and hate because you're like, oh, not to call out anything in specific, but I believe certain whatever, this is against, blah, blah, blah. You're wrong, you're full of this, or you're immoral, that's the word. You're immoral, yeah, that's the word. Yeah. Just like that, that's where it gets very like, I'm not vibing with that, I'm not good with that. But yeah, educating people to be more open, because I met people like who are of whatever their belief is or whatever, and they're literally another human being. So it's like, it's weird, yeah, but educating people to kind of open themselves up and like open the conversation to learning, not just on people outside of the community, people inside the community as well, so vice versa. Yeah.
It's been difficult with my family because my parents are arrogant. I grew up in a very toxic household where we weren't allowed to share our expressions or our emotions at all. We weren't allowed to communicate healthy with our parents. So for that reason, me and my siblings are very close. A lot of my siblings are accepting that me and my partner are queer and gender non-conforming. They don't dead name us or use they use our pronouns. My parents don't really understand. My parents are super old too, and I know that they care a lot about me, and it's just that I wouldn't say they're accepting, because I know that their thinking lies with a lot of arrogance, and they still will look at me differently for the way I dress and the way I look, and like they necessarily won't tell it to me, but I can still see it in their face because I grew up with them, and I'm just like, I know what you're thinking. And I moved out early out of my parents' house because it was literally unsafe to live there as a queer person. But like, it's weird how our relationship has gotten better since I don't live there anymore. Because, like, if I had lived there, like, I know they would have tried to control what I do with my body and all of that. And that's one of the reasons I got out. And, like, I feel like they still have some sort of resentment for me being queer, especially my mom. But I understand this mostly because she's, like, devoutly religious.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of her thinking behind that is just, like, stuff that has been pushed on her by the Catholic Church. And, like, I can only do so much to like help her deconstruct that. But I have a really supporting network of siblings, and my family loves me and my partner, and they're not the best at times, but I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So that's an ongoing process that I've been going through, just with my like own transition. I kind of, it's not something I expected to do, but it's something I'm willing to do. But kind of taking it slow with my family and understanding that it's something really new, not only for like them, but for me. So, or not only for me, but for them, and for everyone else. Even oddly enough, going to the doctor, it's interesting to hear that my own doctor doesn't have an answer for me.
Yeah.
Due to this medication that it's like, honestly, it's a little new. It could be this. I don't really know. So, having to have that knowledge of, okay, it's a little new, it kind of helped me with realizing that the process might be a little different. So, in the beginning, it wasn't easy. I'll say that. I came out for like the second time, so it wasn't something totally new, but it was definitely more drastic. But after it's been a few months, I'm running up on almost a year. So yeah, I think it took them a few months, and they still haven't really been, what is it called when like they don't use like my proper pronouns and stuff. They're still not
dead name you.
Yeah, like they're still not really there yet, but they're also not there to shun me or to kick me out or anything like that. But
so
it's
you
still...
don't feel like unsafe in your house, living where you're at.
No, not so much unsafe. No, that's definitely not the case. For a while in the beginning, there was the threat of like, I don't want you here. But it was also due to like schooling and my mental health and stuff. So it was just too much came in with the transition to say it was just that. That's why it's like, it's been a process, but I understand that it was most likely going to be a process, and I'm willing to own that, I guess. But it hasn't been too bad. I just wish that they would see me, if that makes sense. It's not so much it's not that I don't feel safe, it's more I don't feel seen, which I think, as you know, that definitely plays a big part in your mental health, of just like, I wish you'd recognize that what I'm saying and what I'm feeling is very much real, and I wish you could like love me unconditionally to the point where like you'd at least respect me in that sense, you know? But it's like this introduction and this process, but then like I said, at what point do you draw the line of like, come on, you gotta know at this point. You're kind of disrespecting the person more than anything.
Yeah, it's like when somebody does it over and over again, knowing how you feel. It almost feels like you were saying before, like it's kind of like dehumanizing.
Yeah, you just
like,
don't feel seen anymore.
Yeah, because like if this person knows, like, I don't like being called that, like, don't call me that, and
I have someone still call me sis, like sister, because like I had that it was like a thing we had obviously growing up, and for a while I was like, oh yeah, you know what, that's fine, we had it when we were younger, it's gonna take a while to break. It's been almost a year.
You're like,
of
come
like
on.
Hey, and I verbally have said multiple times, like, I personally don't feel like I associate with that term anymore, you know? How can we almost work around that? Because I want to keep this relationship and this friendship, but it gets a little hard when you're almost not listening, you know. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen my family much since I transitioned. I left high school for a reason. I wanted to be out and away from a more conservative Mexican background. That's where I come from. I think a lot of people like me kind of understand having a family that wants you a certain way. They want you to express your gender in a very, very particular way. That is extremely suffocating. I had have some family members that have reached out in the past few years over social media and stuff, so that's been really great. You know, texts here and there, commenting on like photos, talking about how like cute I look and stuff like that. I'm like, that makes me feel really great. But overall, I haven't really explored that too much in the past couple years.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
In the beginning, no, not in the slightest. It took years of learning and them realizing that being angry at me wasn't going to change anything for them to start trying. And we're in the beginning and it's getting there.
Yeah, in my immediate family, definitely very accepting, and my extended family, it's one of those situations where, you know, for any generation that comes before us, it's very hard for them to comprehend, but they still support me and do what they can to better understand. But it has been a process.
Well, that's a little complicated. Like, my two uncles and my brother have definitely been the most supportive people in my family. My parents are a little more complicated. You know, I mean, they love me and they say that they'll, you know, accept me for whoever I am, but then they have a hard time with it, and it's not too great. But
Yeah.
my uncles have definitely been like the biggest supporters family wise.
No. they're like, oh yeah, we accept you, but they don't act like it. Like they say they do. And then like my mom will say like, oh, it's cool that you don't want to be a boy or girl, but if your brother was trans, then that would be a big problem. And it's like, well, that's not only transphobia, but it's misogyny. So
It was weird. Like, so my mom always through and through, like when I came out as bi and then shifted to like pansexual, she was like, I don't really care. Like, does not shock me. She's been around, you know what I mean? Like, so she's like, and what I mean by that is like she's been in like the U.S. for a while, like, shoot, 20, 30 years now. And like she's met a whole bunch of people from different walks of life, so it doesn't scare her at all. It's like whatever, like, it doesn't shock her, scare her, whatever. My dad is weird because like the way that I came out to them was I was going out with someone of the community at the time. I was talking to them. I had mentioned it to my parents passingly, and I hadn't mentioned anything like that before. And they started asking questions, and it came out like climax into this thing where they just spat it out, and I threw a bit of a fit and calmed down. And I was like, dude, it's cool, you know. But my dad was kind of like, he was just like, he made a comment of like, you can kind of like be friends with those people. And like, it was very weird. It was very bizarre. It was very like, what does that mean? I never really pressed on it. And I don't know, it really bugged me back then because like, first of all, it felt really disrespectful to that person. And like, secondly, like, it's just something hit me really hard and wrong about that. It was like very like, ugh, gross. It was like icky. And still to this day, like, I don't know how that guy, because he's definitely changed, like, since knowing about me. Like, he's definitely cracked open a little bit. He's definitely started asking questions about me because he's noticed. But my mom, pretty consistently, like, been pretty accepting. Like, she's definitely, like, even fought against a lot of others in my family, like my extended family, who have been very homophobic or transphobic towards, like, my husband.
And when you came out to your mom, she was very accepting.
Yeah, it was more of like, oh, like this weird, oh, why aren't your husband providing or working because he was sick? She didn't get it at the time. It's that weird thing. And I feel like a lot of people in the Hispanic community might understand that. It was like this work mentality. You have to provide and survive. Understandable. A little harsh at times, though, yeah. But it's like, it was never about him being trans. It's about him like being sick and shit and blah 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 blah. A lot of circumstance, but it's never about that. Never is about that. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, that's my extended family. Like I mentioned, it's iffy. They can be very transphobic, homophobic. We have some members from the community, others like 2 or 3 of them who are in the community as well, and the interactions haven't been great. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I have to, for people that don't accept me for who I am, there really is only one thing we can say to them, and it's that I do exist, and I am proud of who I am, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
That's literally all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
What I would say is basically, I respect you, and I hope you, at the end of the day, respect me. But I wish you well. I think that's where I'm gonna stick to that. Just I wish you well. I hope to know why it's not as easy for you to accept who I am. If I could, I'd ask, but if anything, have a good one.
I don't think there's anything that can be said to them that will change their opinions like overnight. If you are taught to believe that a certain demographic of people are evil and dangerous, or in somehow going to affect you in this negative way that is based on this sort of speculation, there really isn't anything you can do. Because that's something you're kind of brought up with. I hope that those people continue to learn and grow. I hope they're able to interact with more different, varied types of people and expand their mind to learning about other people, other cultures, other identities. There's a phenomenon where people kind of get stuck in their own bubble when they're talking to the same people over and over. White people talking to a bunch of white people, or, street people talking to a bunch of street people, or whatever it might be. Mexicans talking to a bunch of Mexicans. But they don't really kind of, understand the nuance of human life until they're exposed to things like college, or moving to a new area, or maybe somebody new in the family came over from a different culture. Something that expands your mind and makes you realize that this person's of a different country, or speaks a different language, or has a different religion, but we're still hanging out, I don't know, watching football, or playing video games, or making music, doing something cool. And that's kind of where that kind of comes in. And for all the transphobes, homophobes that are out there, I hope they get more of those experiences and actually get to grow as a human being, and not just be stuck in their little bubble that feels safe to them, but in reality is hurting so many people in the process.
It's not gonna stop me, and if anything, I think it gives me a little bit of a god complex, because if I'm pissing somebody off enough to where they feel they have to comment on it or try and stop me from transitioning in some way, then I'm winning.
Yeah.
It's simple stuff like that.
That it has nothing to do with them. It doesn't affect them, and other than seeing me in person, I don't exist to them, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I'm not looking for their acceptance. I'm looking to live my life without needing their acceptance.
That sucks. Sorry, but it's not really gonna change anything. I mean, I think, the people that for any trans person who has who gets hated a lot, I guess this is advice for them too. Those people that don't accept you and don't support you, they're not gonna be around for long. You're not gonna keep those people in your life.
Yeah.
So I think just not really worrying about it as much, because you know who you are and you should be happy. So
deal with it. And get out of the way.
I would have been a lot angrier about it if you would have asked me maybe a year and a half ago earlier on. But I think I've just become so much more exhausted. But I've also seen a lot of other experiences from the community. And I just hope that people can properly become educated and that we can break this cycle. break this cycle of hate, because it's like it's a vicious fucking cycle that you just cannot snap out of unless you are like either taught or learn or whatever. Because I don't want to create this complex of like, oh, let me teach you, like no savior complex here. But I definitely helping each other learn and creating a space of healthy, constructive conversation. Not like, oh, you suck. No, like that doesn't help anybody. But it's like, hey, why? Like, what do I disagree with or whatever? Like, or whatever that may be. But like, talking about it properly. I know that's hard because not everybody thinks like that. That would be the perfect world. But wherever that's possible, I would say try to do that. And if it's not, then that's unfortunate. But it's like, all we can do is try to, I would say, fizzle that out with more positive, constructive conversation that carries on for the generations.
Okay, I'm trans. We exist and we are human.
I am trans. I am human, and we exist.
We exist and we are human.
I am transgender. We exist and we are human.
I am transgender. We're human and we exist.
I am non-binary. We exist. We are human.
I am trans. We exist and we are human.
I am transgender. We exist and we are human.
Us trans people are misunderstood so often. We are still people, trans or not. We aren't rapists, pedophiles, or misogynistics. We are just people. Sure, we might use they, them, or a different name, but it's not that hard to respect that. Transgender people are not pedophiles. I am a man. I am no woman. You have no right to call me unless it is by my name. Through tears and pain, I will not change. This is who I am. Being transgender has taught me to fear people. I have been told people were going to lynch and kill me. Being trans has made me a fearful person, but I wouldn't change that at all. My ideal support system is just to have those I love and care about. Obviously my husband and partner, but also friends I have close and don't talk to as often. I love my identity. Around people who accept me, it feels great and I feel safe. I wish people knew more about queer trans identities so I wouldn't have to explain my existence so often. I hope for a time where queer and trans identities are not excluded from history and education. I want people to think that queer and trans equals love.
I think that's tough for me personally, just because I didn't have any knowledge of what, for me, testosterone was at that young of an age. But I had the feelings of discomfort and like, I wish I had known more. To say that I would have gotten on hormones is tough because I started at 18. And I felt confident because I had gone through high school, kind of navigating my transition of how I felt. So I started binding first. I started, I had gone through counseling already. So hormones, I think I would probably wait just because I had started binding already. I was already getting help for it, and I was thankful enough to have a certain group that was supportive enough to hear me out and what I was feeling. So for them to hear me out and be like, hey, that makes sense. I feel like we could, if you want a name change, if you feel you want to go by this or that, they were really supportive about that, this group of friends. So for me personally, I don't think I would have started hormones quite yet, but yeah. I actually recently met someone, she's, I think, 6 months or so on estrogen, and she's 17. But for her, I know that it was super hard for her to kind of come to terms with like starting, just because of everything going on with the bills and everything passing. It's scary. It's nerve-wracking at this time to start your transition, and then to be like, it might be taken away in however so long. But knowing that she started at a younger age feeling what I felt at a later age was like, why restrict something to you just because you felt it at an earlier age than me? So to restrict it, no. But for me to have done it at that age, no as well. But hearing out other people's stories, I wouldn't restrict it. I would just hope that there was more provided care overall.
Yeah.
And that people would just listen and not push other narratives and solutions down like our throats.
My life would have been a lot easier if I had hormones. Like when I had realized I was trans, trying to figure out how to safely navigate being trans was really difficult, and also trying to look my gender as much as possible was really difficult. I don't think having access to hormones at that age would have been a bad thing for me, and I think it would have saved me quite a lot of time and troubles if I was on hormones when I was younger. So yeah, I think we should have hormones, available to younger people. I think it would make a lot of people's lives a lot better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I do believe that we should have access to gender care under 18. I know that I would have utilized it at some time, and I mean, it goes down to as minimal as just having the information, because I didn't even understand that trans people existed for a long time growing up in the South. I mean, it was no one explained it to me. And so it's just having that information. I know as far back as elementary school that I would have wanted to know more. I would have wanted to express myself differently than I got to. And so yeah, that would have been fantastic. Honestly, yes. The main thing that I think about is like, would I have chosen to delay puberty of any sort, so I could decide? I think so, yeah. And for me, puberty happened really early on. So, the earlier that I could have gotten that information, the better, because it was early middle school that changes that I didn't want were already happening. So it's like, I think that the information and the access should definitely be there.
It's definitely context. I've definitely seen a lot of parents who kind of like, when you're trans, and it's like bam, and it's like whoa, slow down, let the kid breathe, let it settle, But I would say, kind of letting kids settle and like learn about themselves and develop, like, because they're personally, there's like a very critical developmental years in a kid's life, and I'm not a psychologist, but like earlier years, like to adolescent years, it's a little a little wavy, a little fluid. You figure shit out.
How do you feel about the government blocking hormone care and stuff for you?
Here's the thing, like, give it time, right? But don't be like, oh no, it's gonna be a really hot take. So if you want to,
that's okay. You're all good.
It's a dictatorship. We're running a dictatorship if we're doing that. You are removing people's rights to not only have freedom of speech to exert their opinion and actually have their opinion heard, but you are now restricting people's ability to do as they will with their bodies, because they are not harming themselves. People, it's complete, like, it's ridiculous that people are like, oh, it causes these detrimental issues to the body. Yeah, no, yeah, BS, dude. Like, people are given the signs. You read, like, contract and agreement when you get into medication. They test you and they check your vitals and your body. They don't just give it to anybody. And also you have to be of a certain age usually, you know, otherwise there's a huge set of like red tape for minors. Like, it's not easy, you know, so it's not like they just hand it out like candy, you know. Even for me, like, I socially transitioned. Now I'm on my second year now. I'm about to hit my second year of just being socially transitioned out, and now I'm like finally at a point where I'm like absolutely certain I want to get on HRT. And that's great, and that feels amazing, because now I'm like sure. But you know, it takes a while. It takes a while to figure out. But it's just to like block that completely. It's no bueno. I think that starts the stepping stone and the spiral into so much more, and into what I would call our dark timeline. Totalitarianism, or I can't say it right. That's what it screams. Just total and absolute like give up of control and power, and it just does not, I don't agree with it. It does not settle with me. And like, that might seem extreme to some, you know, but like sometimes that's just the opinions you need. And we are in hard times. Like, we're not in easy times. There's literally people who have to inject their hormones in front of the town councils and or council meetings, you know, to like get the attention. Like, that's ridiculous. But that's what it takes. And that's what we're gonna keep doing. And like, that's, I mean, history itself has proven, through whether it's LGBTQ, through marginalized communities, like through my own community, like the Latino, Latinx, you know, whichever Latina, whichever term you know want to use. And I know there's like, that's a hot topic in of itself, because like, you know, different communities within that, you know, Central Americans, Mexican communities, second, third generation, whatever. But like, I feel like they can all be agreed upon that like there's kind of like a marginalization that happens there, a pushing to the side, and you kind of have to like make yourself heard at times, and push and push. And you know, this is one of the times we kind of have to push, because right now they're just trying to like push us into this ocean of opinions and of policies and of all these like declarations and shit that are happening. But it's good to see that people in the community are like out there enacting and doing stuff.
No idea what I would have done. I like I said, I grew up with parents who would not have allowed that. Like, even if I had access and knew it was an option, like they wouldn't let me shave my head. I joined the Gay Straight Alliance Club and they made me quit. Like, they wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, let's go see a doctor and get you on hormones.
Yeah.
But
No,
maybe
definitely.
I would have thought about that, or at least I think puberty blockers are like a huge thing, because you don't have to go through puberty before 18. Like, you don't have to be, you know, a lot of people don't naturally. Like, some people don't actually hit puberty naturally until they're 18 or older. So I think that, you know, I don't know how I feel about kids taking hormones, but definitely puberty blockers at the very least should be readily available. Because then, you know, it's like, maybe they don't know yet. Maybe they're just not ready to be an adolescent or an adult yet, and that's totally fine. Like, puberty sucks. Puberty blockers are like a really good, important thing to have as an option for people.